Alright, hello there. I'm Mr. Justin, and today I'm just going to be showing you how to start a Photoshop file for animation. So I have Adobe Photoshop CC 2018 open right now, and you can see that this is the screen I get when I first open up my program. It might be a little different for other people, but it should look something like this. So what we want to do is over here on the left side, we want to create a new document. Give it a minute to load up. You'll notice, depending on the speed of your computer, that these things happen quicker or slower. And so here's our new document option. I'm going to create a film and video file, and it's going to be this first option here, which is HD TV 1080p, 1920 by 1080 pixels. So I'm going to leave that there. As far as the resolution, if anybody has any information on that, I'm very curious, because for me it only matters how many pixels wide and high it is. The resolution shouldn't matter, since it just depends on the size of your screen. But apparently if you change the resolution to anything too high, it really slows things down. But I was under the impression that that's just a print option. Anyway, so I keep everything else pretty much the same, and I hit create. Get a little load up screen here. Now here's the part where I can't really see what everybody's screens look like, and it's very possible that a lot of different people will have different screens when they first open up this file. You might have some other tabs here on the right, or other tools on the left, or some other stuff up here. Up here it should actually be pretty much the same. But this is what we want it to get to look like. And some of the important things. So we've got this color tab here, which allows us to pick the color that we want. We're going to be using these colors a lot as we paint. Brushes here, also important. If you find a tab that you don't want, like I don't necessarily need this swatch one right now, I should be able to right click on it and close it, and it goes away. So I've got my brush settings, I've got my brushes, I've got my colors. Down here I'm going to leave the channels and paths for now, but mainly I'm going to be using this layers panel. Layers are really, really important in Photoshop, so you're going to want to have that front and center. Down here, this big empty section here is our timeline, so this is how we can actually operate through time in Photoshop to make animation. So we're going to leave that like that for now. You'll notice anytime you create a film and video document, you get these safe lines here, which can be useful in some occasions, but not right now. So we're actually going to get rid of those by going up to View, and we're going to Clear Canvas Guides. So now they're gone. If I want to look around the canvas, if the whole thing's not available, I can hold down the space key. My cursor turns into a hand, and I can sort of grab it and move it around. I can also use Command and the minus key to zoom out. I can do that multiple times. Command and plus goes closer, zooms in. I am using an iMac, so I'm running one of the California Park operating systems, El Capitan. It's a pretty old computer actually, but it still gets the job done. I've put a lot of extra RAM here, as you can see, which helps a little bit. So I've got my canvas, that's what we call this drawing space, ready to go. And that's pretty much set up. The only other thing you need to do is, if you're going to start animating, you do need to create the video timeline. All you have to do is click on this button right here in the middle. Now you've got your timeline. Immediately after creating a video timeline, you're going to want to go to this tiny little option button right here. It's basically just 3 lines. And you're going to open this up, and there's a couple of different things that you can do from here, which are very helpful. First and most important is you want to set your timeline frame rate. By default, it's set at 29.97, which is like a video frames per second standard. But for animation, we want a much cleaner number. The most common, most useful is 24 frames per second. That's old school. That's still pretty much common in all 3D animation. Great for 2D animation. So we'll go ahead and pick that. But just so you know, 12 frames per second is a little feels a little clunkier, but for hand-drawn animation, it can save you a little bit of time. Or you can go to custom and type in any number you want here. 10 is another good frame rate to animate at, but we're going to keep it at 24 for now. All these other ones are also standards for different kinds of videos. 24 frames, okay, so we've got that. And now we're going to start animating. We're able to start animating here. And there's two ways, basically, to animate. And they both have to do with these layers here. The first way, which gives you a lot more control, is to make a new layer for each new drawing. So if I pick up my pen here on my Cintiq, you can see I'm just going to draw a circle so you can see. So there we go. And I'm not even on the Cintiq, I'm drawing on the monitor here. So that's really not that great. But I've got a circle, and now basically all I want to do is create a new layer. But there's a couple of things to keep in mind about that. If you go down to the very bottom of the screen here and click on the new layer button, it creates a new layer right above that, and we can start drawing on it. But you can see that these two layers here, layer 0 and layer 1, are right on top of each other. And I've also actually made a very classic error. So I was drawing right on layer 0, which actually has all of these white pixels here. So that means that if I want to erase some of the circle, I go over to my eraser tool and I start erasing, and look what happens. We're erasing the circle, but we're also erasing the white pixels that it was drawn on top of. So now you can see behind that, which is this checkerboard, which represents complete transparency. So I'm actually going to turn off this layer. Turn off this layer and just draw right on layer 1. So let's go ahead and draw our circle again, which has got transparency behind it, which is fine with me. And now we're going to create another layer on top. And this layer we're going to move out one frame. So this is frame 1, and then this is frame 2 here. So that way when I go here, we don't see that first part anymore. Now we do have to zoom in on our timeline because right now we're pretty far out. So you can see that actually each layer is really long. It's 100 and something frames long. Let's see, 120 frames long. So I actually have to grab this layer and make it, I just want it to be one frame. And I want this one to be super short too. So, and I'm actually going to delete that layer 0 where I drew that first circle because it's useless now. So I select it and I just go down to this trash can down at the bottom, click, delete the layer, yes please. I got to make layer 2 here the same length as layer 1, which is 1 frame long. So now I have both of those. We're going to zoom in really close to see a single frame. We're going to move that over a little bit so that we go here, go to the next one. There is a cool option in this little timeline option box that we saw before to enable onion skins, which means that we can see a little bit the last frame we drew. and when we draw, we'll see the next frame. I'm just going to have this circle shrink, get a little smaller each time. So I drew it a little smaller there, and now if I go and make another layer, this is the problem. Each time you click on this Add a New Layer button, Photoshop has a default of this 120 frames, which is no good, because each time, if you do it this way, each time you make a new layer, you have to go and you have to grab the end, make it super small, zoom back in, separate it like that. So we've got this new frame. You can see the half transparent older drawings, and now I can make the circle even smaller. It's kind of tilting too. And then to do the next frame, I'm just going to grab layer 3 and I'm going to drag it down into the new layer button down here, and that made a copy of layer 3. Same length right where layer 3 was. So now I can just drag that over. I do have to move this is called the playhead, this little line that I'm moving back and forth. That shows you where you are in time. You can kind of start to see the animation happening here. And now notice that frame 3 and layer 3 and layer 3 copy both have that drawing. So I want to be on layer 3 copy. I want to select the entire drawing, which is Command A. You can see what they call the marching ants. It's the selection marquee around the whole canvas. And then I'm just going to do Command X, which cuts or deletes. It actually cuts that drawing. So it's actually sitting in my virtual clipboard. If I were to hit Command V, it would paste it back in. But I'm not going to paste it. I'm going to leave it on that clipboard and it'll go away eventually. So now I'm ready to draw my next smaller circle. And then I do it over and over again. You can also right click on a layer and you can duplicate it. When you do that though, just so you know, you do get this dialog box that pops up first, which allows you to rename it and things like that. So you have to click OK. And it does the same thing, it's just that one extra step. So then I drag that out. I can use my arrow keys left and right to move the playhead if in this little channel box over here I have my timeline shortcut keys enabled. If that happens, then I can use the arrow keys. If I don't have it disabled, I press left and right, nothing happens. So I want to make sure I leave those on. And now I can move through there. So there we go. We've got, well, that one's the same as that one, so I need to Command A, Command X to get rid of that drawing. And then I'm going to make it just a little bit smaller, and I think that'll be about it. That's about the worst animation ever, but now we can see you can scrub through, which means to like look at each drawing, just kind of dragging back and forth with the mouse, like that. You can actually play the animation. Here's the play button right above the layers in the timeline section, and it just beep, 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 really fast. This little gear here, I have it set to loop the playback, and it actually changes the resolution, because when you're just previewing animation, you don't really want to make your computer work too hard, so it lowers the resolution. So there we go, we've got that. And now we're ready to export our animation so other people can watch it without having to open up a Photoshop file. So to do that, we go up here to these menus, we go to File, and we're going to Export. And towards the bottom here, we are going to render the video. It's going to turn all of these individual drawings into a single video file. And when it comes to exporting, there are a lot of options, and it does take a little bit of playing around with settings to find the ones that work just for you. Although I will say video export files are more universal these days. It used to be that you had to have just the right codec in order to play it on YouTube or on certain computers. Nowadays it's a little bit easier than that. So anyway, here's our render box, and it allows us to change the name of it. So we're going to call it Mr. Justin Test Circle, and we're going to select the folder. So it's going to open up our file management system here. In my desktop, I have all sorts of random folders that you can see here. In Originals, we've got the Mr. Justin folder. In there, I'm going to create a new folder, just right down here, and that's called Test Circle. I usually like to have folders for new projects because in animation you often have multiple videos that you composite later, often in Premiere, so I want to have a place to put any new files that I happen to make. So I create that, and then I choose it. Now, we're not quite done yet. That was just this location section here. In this next square, these are the video settings. So right now it's set to Photoshop image sequence, which is actually not what I want. Adobe Media Encoder allows me to turn it into a video. This Photoshop image sequencer would have actually spat out each of these individual frames as its own image, which can be useful if you're going to combine it later, but this is going to be our final video, so we can just turn it into an actual video. H.264 is a really handy way to compress your videos. Video codecs and compression and all that stuff can get really technical and complicated, so I'm not going to go into it here, but there's lots of information if you want to know more about that. We're going to keep the size, the regular document size. We're going to keep our frame rate, the document frame rate, at 24 frames per second. Aspect ratio, keep it 1.0, that's a square pixel. These other kind of old school settings, I think, change the shapes of your pixels to fit TV screens, so we want to just keep it at 1.0. I'm going to do the whole thing. Render options, we're actually, H.264 doesn't handle a lot of this stuff, so we're going to leave it. We're going to do the work area, which is from 0 to 4. A lot of times in animation, you start counting at 0 instead of at 1. But we can go into that another time. So now we're pretty much ready to go. We can hit render and let the computer do its work. A big part of animating is sitting and waiting for things to render. So here it goes. Hopefully it doesn't take too long. It was only 4 frames, so actually it's already done. So now I like to go find my video. Here it is in Test Circle. You can see it's an MP4. Because we exported it with the H.264 encoder and it's an MP4, it turned those transparent pixels, the ones that were like the gray and white checkers, into black pixels. It's just the way that it changed it. There are some video files that could handle transparency, which allows you to put one video on top of another video and you can see through it but still have your animation, which can be really useful. Those types of video files that have the transparencies tend to be really, really big, though. It has to have a lot more information in it to do that. So we kept ours pretty small. You can actually see it's only 173 kilobytes, not even a megabyte. So that's pretty good, especially since it's just a test. So now in Mac I can select my file here, and if I just hit the space bar, it opens up a quick preview. There it goes. Just play those 4 frames real fast. And now it's ready to go. So I've got this MP4 that I can pretty much do whatever I want with now. I can upload it, I can add it to other videos, I could bring it into other programs to make changes to it. But yeah, that is the basic process of opening up a Photoshop file, using the timeline to make animation, and then exporting that video to share. Alright, thank you very much for watching this. I hope it was helpful, and stay tuned.